I came home on a Tuesday evening to find my parking spot empty. Not the kind of empty where you think, oh, I must have parked on the street and forgot. I mean the specific stomach-dropping empty of a space that should have had my car in it. My car. The one I'd spent 3 years saving for. The one I'd driven off the lot 8 months ago and cried a little in the parking garage because I couldn't believe I'd actually done it. My name is not important. What's important is that I'm 31 years old, I work as a licensed occupational therapist at a pediatric clinic, and I bought that car myself. No cosigner. No family loan. No help from anyone. A 2023 Kia Telluride, dark navy blue, every penny of the down payment coming from a savings account my family didn't even know existed, because I'd learned a long time ago that in my family, visible money is shared money, whether you agree to share it or not. I stood in the parking lot of my apartment complex for a solid minute, just staring at the concrete. Then I walked back inside, set my work bag down on the kitchen counter, and called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, which should have been my first sign. My mother never picks up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, and her voice had that particular warmth it gets when she's done something she already knows I'm not going to like. "Mom, where's my car?" A pause, just long enough. "Your father wanted to talk to you about that. We were going to call tonight, actually." "Where is my car?" Another pause. Then she said, very carefully, like she'd rehearsed it, "Your brother needed it. It's just temporary. You take the bus to work sometimes anyway, right? And he has the kids, and his truck has been." I hung up. I want to be clear about something. My brother, who is 35 years old, has 2 kids, a house, and a pickup truck that supposedly needed repairs. My brother, who has never in his adult life held a job for longer than 14 months. My brother had apparently convinced our parents that he needed my Telluride, and my parents, apparently, had decided that was a reasonable thing to just go ahead and make happen. Without asking me. Without telling me. They used the spare key. The one I'd left with my mother 18 months ago for emergencies when I'd had a minor surgery and needed someone to be able to get into my apartment and my car in case something went wrong. That key. I sat down on my couch and did not cry, even though I wanted to. I thought about my options. I thought about calling my father. I thought about calling my father directly. And then I thought about something else. Something small, something I'd almost forgotten, something that changed the entire shape of what was about to happen. 3 months ago, my brother had gotten his second DUI. He'd called me from the parking lot of a Applebee's at 11:30 on a Saturday night, and I'd sat with him for 2 hours on the phone while he figured out what to do. I hadn't told our parents. He'd asked me not to. I'd kept that secret because I was trying to be a good sister and because I genuinely thought that it had scared him enough to change something. The court had processed the case 6 weeks later. His license had been suspended for 1 year. My brother was driving my car. With a suspended license. My car, which was registered to me, insured under my policy, and was now being operated by someone legally prohibited from being behind a wheel. I picked my phone back up, but I didn't call my mother back. I didn't call my father. I opened my insurance app first, took screenshots of my policy information, and then I called the non-emergency line for my city's police department. The dispatcher was calm and straightforward. She asked for my name, my vehicle's make and model, my license plate number, and my address. She asked if I knew who had taken the vehicle. I told her yes. I had reason to believe it was a family member, and I had reason to believe that person was operating the vehicle on a suspended license due to a DUI conviction. She took all of it down. She told me an officer would be in touch. My phone rang 4 minutes later. I don't know how they knew. Maybe my mother called my brother. Maybe my brother saw something. Maybe it was just bad timing catching up to people who'd been making bad decisions. But it was my father, and he was not using his warm-hearted voice. He was using the other one. "What did you do?" he said. Not a question. An accusation. "I reported my car stolen," I said, "because it was stolen." "It wasn't stolen, it was borrowed." "Dad." I kept my voice completely even. I'd been practicing this in my head for 4 minutes, which turns out to be enough time to get very clear about what you're going to say. "You took my car without my knowledge or consent. You used a key that was given to you for medical emergencies. My brother's license is suspended. Whatever you want to call what happened tonight, the police are going to call it something specific, and it's going to be on a record." Silence. "Now, I'd like my car back, tonight. And I'd like to know where it is." My father said in a voice I hadn't heard from him since I was in high school and had genuinely done something wrong. "You don't understand what you've just done." "I understand exactly what I've done," I said. "Do you want to tell me where the car is, or should I let the officer find it?" He gave me the address. It was my brother's house, 12 minutes away. What I should tell you, before I get to what happened next, is something about my family that took me a long time to fully see. My brother is the oldest. I'm the youngest. There is 4 years between us, and there has been a gap between us and my parents' eyes for my entire life that cannot be measured in years. He dropped out of college. They paid off his credit card debt 3 times. When his first marriage fell apart, they co-signed his new lease. When his truck needed a new transmission last year, my father wrote him a check. And every single time when I would quietly observe that this was maybe not sustainable, that this was maybe not teaching him anything, my mother would say some version of, "He's struggling, you're doing fine, you don't need it the way he does." I had stopped arguing. I had stopped expecting anything. I had built a very clean, very separate life, and I had been careful, so careful, not to let anything I owned become something they could redirect toward him. And then I made the mistake of leaving a spare key. The officer who called me back was named something I didn't catch, a woman with a flat, professional tone who told me she was at my brother's address and that my vehicle appeared to be in the driveway. She confirmed the license plate. She asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment because it wasn't triumph, it was grief. The specific kind of grief that comes from having your worst suspicions about people you love confirmed past the point where you can pretend otherwise. My parents had looked at what I'd built, quietly, by myself, without asking them for a single thing, and had decided that my brother's need was more important than my ownership. Not my loan, not my insurance, not my name on the title. Just he needed it, so. My phone started ringing again. My mother, this time. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father again. Then a number I didn't recognize that I later found out was my brother calling from his neighbor's phone because, in a decision that still baffles me, he had not brought his own. I drove to my brother's house in an Uber. The officer was still there when I arrived. My car was in the driveway, running like someone had been about to leave in a hurry and thought better of it. My brother was standing on his front porch with his arms crossed, and he looked at me with an expression I can only describe as wounded, like he was the one who had been wronged here. "Really?" he said. "You called the cops on me, on your own brother." "You drove my car," I said, "on a suspended license that you got for a DUI that I didn't tell mom and dad about, by the way, which I'm going to stop keeping to myself now." His expression changed. "You're going to need to speak with the officer," I said. "I'll wait." I stood by my car while he did. The conversation was not long. Afterward, the officer came over to me and explained what would happen next. Citations, documentation, the case going to a prosecutor's office for review of charges. She was kind about it, in the way people are kind when they're also being completely matter-of-fact. She told me to make sure I changed my locks and recovered any spare keys I'd given out. I thanked her. I got in my car. I drove home. My mother called 7 more times that night. My father sent 3 texts, each one slightly longer and more formal than the last, which is how I know he was getting angrier. He gets more grammatically correct the more furious he is. The final one said, verbatim, "What you did tonight will not be forgotten. Your brother has children. You have no idea what kind of pressure he is under. You chose a car over your family, and I hope you are satisfied." I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the nightstand and went to sleep, which is something I would not have thought I was capable of doing, but apparently when you've been holding something tight in your chest for a very long time and you finally let it go, exhaustion takes over pretty fast. What happened over the following 2 weeks was, in some ways, harder than the night itself. My mother stopped calling and started texting instead, which meant there was now a record of everything she was saying. A lot of it was variations on the same theme. I was selfish. I was cold. I had humiliated my brother in front of his children. I didn't understand what family meant. There was one message that said I had always thought I was better than everyone, and I saved that one specifically, not to show anyone, but because I wanted to remember what it looked like when someone confirms something you'd suspected for years. My father did not contact me again for 5 days. When he did, it was a phone call, and his opening line was, "I want you to understand that what your brother did was wrong, but what you did was also wrong." "What did I do that was wrong?" I asked. He paused. You escalated. My car was taken without my permission, I said. By someone with a suspended license. What would you have had me do? Called us first, given us a chance to handle it. I called Mom first, I said. She told me Dad wanted to talk to me about it. That implies you both already knew. Which means you knew, and you didn't call me before it happened, so I'm not sure what calling you after was going to accomplish. Another long pause. Your brother could lose his license entirely, he said. He could face criminal charges. I know, I said. That's what happens when you drive on a suspended license. He has children. I know he has children. You don't understand what it's like to have that responsibility. Dad. I took a breath. I'm not responsible for the choices he makes. I'm not responsible for managing the consequences of those choices. I have been watching this family absorb the consequences of his choices for 15 years, and what it has done is make sure he never has to absorb them himself. I'm not going to be part of that. Not anymore. Not when it costs me something I worked 3 years to earn. He didn't respond to that directly. He said he hoped I'd reconsider my position, which told me he had expected me to apologize and had not prepared any material for what to do when I didn't. My brother's case ended up going to the county prosecutor's office. Between the existing DUI conviction and the suspended license, the DA's office decided to pursue charges. He hired an attorney, with money from my parents, presumably, and eventually took a plea deal that included significant fines, mandatory DUI counseling, and an extension of his license suspension. He did not face jail time, which I understand can feel unsatisfying if you want the story to have a cleaner ending. What I will say is that the fines were substantial, the record is real, and for the first time in my brother's adult life, there was a consequence that my parents could not write a check to erase. My car was undamaged. I had the locks rekeyed. I did not return the spare key to my mother. There was a family thing, a birthday dinner for my grandmother, about 6 weeks after all of this. I went because she is 91 years old and had nothing to do with any of it, and because I am capable of being in the same room as my family without it being a confrontation. My brother was there. He did not look at me for most of the evening. Near the end of the night, when people were gathering coats and saying their goodbyes, he stopped next to me in the hallway and said, quietly, I want you to know I didn't think it would turn into all of this. I looked at him. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was surprised to find out there was more weight on the way. I know, I said, and I meant it. I don't think he had mapped out the consequences. I don't think he'd thought about my insurance or the registration or the license or any of it. I think he just thought, she has it, I need it, Mom and Dad will smooth it over like they always do. The problem is that I'm not going to smooth it over, not anymore. My mother and I have a relationship now that I would describe as careful. She calls. I answer. We talk about my grandmother, about her garden, about a show she's watching. We do not talk about what happened. I think she's waiting for me to forgive her in a way that allows her to pretend it didn't happen, and I think she will be waiting for a long time because forgiveness and pretending are not the same thing. And I have gotten very clear about that distinction. My father and I have spoken maybe 4 times since. He is not a man who apologizes. I was not expecting him to become one. What I want to say, if you've gotten this far, is this. I'm not telling this story because I want you to think I'm someone who turned on her family without a second thought. I thought about it. I thought about it in the 4 minutes between hanging up on my mother and calling the non-emergency line. I thought about my brother's kids and my parents' feelings and what it would mean for every family gathering for the next decade. And then I thought about the 3 years of early mornings and skipped vacations and packed lunches and automatic transfers to a savings account, and I thought about my name on that title, and I thought, this is mine. I earned this, and no one gets to decide it belongs to someone else. So I made the call, and I'd make it again. I keep thinking about the spare key, such a small thing, a piece of cut metal I handed to my mother in a hospital waiting room after a minor surgery because I wanted someone to be able to reach me if something went wrong. That's all it was, an act of trust inside a vulnerable moment. And somewhere between that waiting room and the Tuesday evening I came home to an empty parking spot, it became permission. Not in my mind, in theirs. That's the part I've had to sit with the longest. Not the anger. The anger was clean and quick. What lingered was understanding how we got there. My brother had spent 15 years learning that consequences were temporary because someone always stepped in. My parents had spent 15 years believing that protecting him from outcomes was the same thing as loving him, And I had spent 15 years staying quiet, building separately, assuming that keeping my distance from all of it was enough to keep me safe. It wasn't. Because the moment I left something valuable within reach, it became part of the same system. There's a version of that night where I call my father back, where I give them until morning, where I keep it in the family. I know what that version looks like because I've been living it my whole life. It looks like my brother handing the keys back with no real understanding of what he'd taken. It looks like a family dinner 2 weeks later where everyone pretends. It looks like the next time being easier for them because the last time had no weight. I didn't want to blow up my family. I want to be honest about that. What I wanted was for the thing I had earned to be treated as mine. What I understood, standing in that parking lot, was that the only way to make that true was to act like it was true. Not to ask for permission to be believed, but to simply proceed as though my ownership was real. Because it was. Calling the non-emergency line wasn't cruelty. It was accuracy. This is what it looks like when you take something that isn't yours. My brother is not a bad person. I don't think that. I think he's a person who was never asked to develop the muscles that difficulty builds, because every difficulty was quietly lifted away before he had to carry it. That's not entirely his fault, but it is, at some point, his responsibility, and that point had come and gone many times before that Tuesday night. What I know now is that integrity isn't something you perform for other people. It's the thing you protect when no one's watching. When your name is on a title and someone with a key decides that doesn't matter. Protecting it sometimes means doing the hard, uncomfortable, unrewarded thing. Not to punish anyone, not out of coldness, but because the alternative is handing over something that cost you years and calling that love. I called the police because my car was taken. I'd do it again because I know who I am and I worked too hard to let anyone redefine that for me.